I don't want people to see me in a weakened state.
People have real problems and no one gives a shit.
I don't want people to see me as ungrateful or anything like that. I was nervous that that's what this makes me look like.
Cue the laugh.
Lots of people to thank for this video.
God, you're annoying.
Is that inappropriate?
You're kidding, right?
Dude, like, bro.
Weird.
It is a colossal disaster.
After weeks of viral memes, relentless TikToks, and fan-fueled chaos over their latest Snow White parody, the writers behind Family Guy have allegedly broken their silence.
So I've got my Baymax blanket, which I use when I have anxiety.
According to Entertainment Insiders, the team, known for their unapologetic humor and savage pop culture takedowns, are reportedly standing firm behind their Disney roast, and specifically, the way they skewered the fallout surrounding Rachel Zegler's very public meltdown.
I can only make grilled cheese.
That sounds right.
Now to be clear, Family Guy hasn't issued an official press statement. They don't do damage control. But sources close to the show's inner circle claim the message from the writer's room is crystal clear. We said what everyone's thinking.
Celebrities. They're just like us.
That alleged comment, which has been repeated across Hollywood gossip blogs and Reddit threads, reportedly reflects what many believe is the creative team's mindset, that the chaos around Snow White deserved a punchline, and Rachel Zegler's behavior made her the perfect unspoken target. Because that's the twist, isn't it? They didn't even say her name. They didn't need to. One scene, one collapsing roller coaster labeled Disney stock, one screaming Peter Griffin shouting, "What is everything?" And just like that, Rachel Zegler wasn't just a rising actress anymore. She became a metaphor for corporate storytelling gone hollow, for the death of fairy tale magic.
Like, in the eyes of the law, you have to be nice to me, and I'm an adult.
That's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
For a studio so tangled in modern messaging, it forgot how to make audiences feel. Insiders speculate that the Family Guy team didn't expect the reaction to be quite so massive. But once it was, they leaned in. They're not trying to walk anything back, one source said. They've done this long enough to know when they've struck a cultural nerve. And this one hit like a hammer. Online, the silence from the show has only amplified the firestorm. No clarifications, no behind-the-scenes commentary, just the episode and the fallout. Fans are dissecting each moment, pulling out every visual cue and dialogue line, and assigning meaning where the writers may or may not have intended it. And yet, according to whispers from people familiar with the show's production, the team is allegedly watching it all unfold with a smirk.
Feels like a zoo to get through baggage, but it's actually super empty here.
Because Family Guy didn't just drop a joke. They dropped a statement, a no-name-needed middle finger to an industry wrapped up in its own identity, and to a Snow White reboot that spiraled into one of the most talked-about flops in recent memory. And if the writers alleged off-the-record reaction is anything to go by, they're not done yet. It started with a gag, one line, 5 words, delivered by an animated character who's made a career out of being clueless. But within 24 hours, "What is everything?" wasn't just a punchline. It was a battle cry. TikTokers were quoting it. Reddit threads were dissecting it. YouTube compilations of Rachel Zegler's most infamous Snow White clips were suddenly stitched together with Peter Griffin's voice echoing over them. What Family Guy had done, intentionally or not, was hand the internet a meme that perfectly captured the exhaustion so many viewers were already feeling. Let's rewind that scene. Peter's watching TV. A beautiful woman appears on screen. "Wow, that girl is hot," he says. His friend replies, "That's a boy." Then it happens again and again. Each time, Peter grows more confused, more agitated, until finally, red-faced and panicked, he screams, "What is everything?" The timing couldn't have been sharper. Just days before, clips of Rachel Zegler had gone viral again, this time for resurfaced interviews where she dismissed the original Snow White as outdated, criticized the prince as a stalker, and insisted the remake had no love story.
Oh wow, my abs are popping off.
Somehow she has to not burst out laughing.
In isolation, those quotes were eye-roll inducing, but paired with Family Guy's chaos, they felt like prophecy, because to many viewers that was the problem. Everything was being rewritten. Characters they loved were unrecognizable. Stories, once filled with wonder, were now delivered with corporate-approved messaging and activist talking points. Audiences didn't feel seen, they felt scolded. And Family Guy's breakdown, delivered through a man-child cartoon voice, somehow hit the emotional truth better than 1,000 think pieces ever could. The line exploded across the web. "What is everything?" started appearing on fan merch. It got edited into political clips, movie trailers, even celebrity interviews. It became shorthand for cultural confusion, a stand-in for a generation trying to keep up with a Hollywood that won't stop shifting the ground beneath them. And at the center of all that shifting ground stood Rachel Zegler. Insiders say the writers of Family Guy, far from retreating, allegedly watched the meme take off with silent satisfaction. They hadn't name-dropped anyone. They didn't have to. Audiences connected the dots all on their own. And once they did, the internet did what it always does. It ran with it, dragged it, and looped it until reality itself blurred with satire. Because when a cartoon character's meltdown speaks more truth than a $250 million movie, something's broken. And Family Guy? They just handed the world the words to say it out loud. In the era of call-outs, clapbacks, and endless name-dropping, Family Guy did something far more lethal. They said nothing and let everyone else do the math. No one in the episode pointed to Rachel Zegler. No animated cutaway featured a caricature of her standing at a podium ranting about the patriarchy. And yet, audiences knew exactly who was being roasted, because when the subtext is loud enough, a name becomes unnecessary. The genius of the episode wasn't in what it showed, it was in what it implied. Take the Disneyland scene. Peter Griffin, dazed and confused, walks through the park as a roller coaster labeled Disney stock plunges violently in the background. It's not a metaphor, it's a diagnosis.
Last time I checked, I'm old as hell.
Then Peter flips through characters and identities, culminating in his meme-worthy Meltdown. The unspoken villain, a system of entertainment where storytelling has been hijacked by branding, agenda, and performance activism. And in that system, according to fan interpretation, Rachel Zegler became its accidental mascot. Insiders familiar with the show's process say this kind of strategic silence is classic Family Guy. It gives them legal deniability. It protects them from accusations of direct slander. But most importantly, it lets the audience fill in the gaps. And when a cultural moment is hot enough, you don't need to say the name. The audience has already assigned it, and that's exactly what happened here. The moment the episode aired, TikTok lit up with mashups of Rachel's press clips edited between scenes from the show. Twitter fed the fire with side-by-sides, Peter shouting, "What is everything?" spliced next to Rachel declaring the prince a stalker. YouTube commentaries didn't ask if she was the target. They assumed it. What was meant to be a roast of Hollywood's identity-driven storytelling instantly became a roast of Rachel Zegler by proxy. And that's the brilliance and the brutality of Family Guy's playbook. They didn't have to risk a direct hit. They just left enough breadcrumbs for the internet to finish the job. And finish it they did. Speculative sources claim the writers are completely aware of how their silence functions. It's calculated, one insider reportedly said. They know exactly how much to show, and how much to let the culture take care of on its own. And when that culture is already primed with months of frustration, backlash, and viral theater walkouts, a wink is more powerful than a scream. So no, Rachel's name was never uttered. But when a joke becomes the avatar for an entire public meltdown, and everyone watching already knows who's standing in the wreckage, you don't have to say it to hit the bullseye.
You are given a golden goose opportunity, and that golden goose is belly up.
If Family Guy's roast was a surgical strike, South Park's was a carpet bomb. Long before Peter Griffin wandered through Disneyland or shouted, "What is everything?" the creators of South Park had already detonated the conversation with a special so sharp, so deliberately pointed, that insiders claim even Disney insiders were left stunned and scrambling. That episode, joining the Panderverse, didn't tiptoe around its message. It blew the doors off. And where Family Guy left room for interpretation, South Park named names, mimicked executives, and handed viewers a full thesis on why Disney, and by extension, Rachel Zegler, was at the center of Hollywood's implosion. It starts with a character clearly modeled after Kathleen Kennedy, Disney's longtime executive producer and one of the central architects behind its recent reboots. She's handed a mystical object called the Pander Stone, which gives her the power to inject a diverse woman into every major franchise, regardless of context, story, or audience desire. From Star Wars to Indiana Jones to Marvel to, yes, Snow White, no series is safe. And as Cartman spirals through multiverse versions of every franchise, each now filled with joyless, politically righteous, overly rebranded characters, the satire cuts deeper and deeper. It's not just a parody of casting choices, it's a takedown of corporate cowardice, of studios more afraid of Twitter than of losing their core audience. Then comes the line. The now viral moment that took the internet by storm. Kennedy, arms raised, declares with robotic enthusiasm, "Put a chick in it and make her gay." Those words weren't just a punchline, they were a trigger. Overnight, they became the go-to phrase for every critic, YouTuber, and frustrated fan, trying to articulate why modern blockbusters often feel more like corporate lectures than escapism. And whether intended or not, the line became synonymous with Rachel Zegler's version of Snow White, a movie stripped of its love story, steeped in political subtext, and headlined by an actress who seemed openly disdainful of the original. Insiders say the South Park team knew exactly what they were doing. "They're not subtle," one source familiar with the show reportedly said. "They saw where the wind was blowing and fired before anyone else had the nerve. And the impact? Devastating." Snow White was already in trouble, but after joining the Panderverse aired, the cultural perception went from skeptical to scorched. Even casual fans who hadn't followed the drama were suddenly watching clips, laughing at memes, and questioning whether Disney had lost the plot entirely.
It was a magical time, and I'm a Disney princess, and it was just very magical.
South Park didn't create the storm, but they caught it in a bottle and shook it until it shattered. And that's why when Family Guy followed up weeks later, they didn't have to build the narrative. It was already written. The groundwork was done. The jokes were primed. All they had to do was look at the wreckage and light one more match. Before the roasts, before the memes, before the roller coaster labeled Disney stock, Rachel Zegler was supposed to be the future of Disney. A new kind of princess for a new kind of era. Empowered, modern, socially aware. But somewhere between the press tour soundbites, the box office meltdown, and now 2 separate animated comedy shows roasting the brand she fronted, that future has started to collapse in real time. And insiders say it's only getting worse. The initial backlash to Rachel's interviews was already intense, dismissing the 1937 Snow White as weird, calling the prince a stalker, doubling down that there would be no love story this time around. To her defenders, she was speaking truth to tradition, but to the broader audience, especially longtime Disney fans, it felt like mockery, not modernization, erasure. Then came the political commentary. TikToks turned into battlegrounds. People weren't just upset about the film's tone. They were angry that Rachel seemed more interested in framing Snow White as a feminist lecture than as a fairy tale. She even referenced current events in ways that some critics say muddied the movie's rollout even further. It became hard to tell where Snow White ended and Rachel's activism began, and that's when the fans started to walk away. According to multiple sources, the fallout behind the scenes was immediate. Planned appearances were scrapped. Interview requests were denied. Marketing materials were quietly shifted to emphasize Gal Gadot and Andrew Burnap instead. But even those adjustments couldn't stop the bleeding, because then came the memes. When South Park dropped their bombshell Panderverse parody, Rachel became the silent center of a storm she never asked for, but arguably helped create. And when Family Guy followed suit, mocking Disney's imploding branding and letting the internet draw its own connections, the public perception hardened. She wasn't just a controversial actress anymore, she was a punchline. Insiders say that Rachel's team had hoped the criticism would blow over, that a few weeks off social media and a pivot to another project would reset the narrative. But that hope has all but evaporated, because every time a new parody lands, every time Peter Griffin screams, "What is everything?" or Cartman trips through another multiverse of virtue-signaling heroines, Rachel's name resurfaces. She has, fairly or not, become the face of the backlash, not because she was the worst part of the film, but because she spoke the loudest. She became the symbol of a movie and a moment that audiences felt was talking down to them. And now, even as Disney prepares to move forward,
I am not asking. I am demanding.
Insiders say Rachel is still stuck under the weight of Snow White's shadow. In the wake of Snow White's implosion, you'd think Disney would be moving cautiously, reassessing, taking stock of how a single misfire, with the wrong message, the wrong tone, or the wrong face, can become a cultural firestorm. But if insider whispers are true, the studio is already lining up its next billion-dollar swing, a live-action remake of Tangled. And according to multiple speculative sources, Rachel Zegler is allegedly attached. Let that sink in. After a $250 million disaster that triggered memes, parodies, and industry-wide panic, Disney is reportedly doubling down. Same formula, same face, same fallout. And the reaction? It's already starting to burn. Hashtag #NotMyRapunzel began trending within hours of the rumor hitting entertainment blogs. Comment sections exploded. TikToks began surfacing with side-by-sides of Rapunzel and Rachel, captioned with things like, "From fairy tale to press conference," and "She's gonna cut her own hair out of spite." Harsh? Yes, but indicative of a larger truth. The audience isn't ready to forget. Tangled is set to be Disney's most expensive live-action remake yet. with some insiders suggesting the studio could sink upwards of $500 million once marketing, reshoots, and global promotion are factored in. But after reportedly losing close to $200 million on Snow White, even longtime Disney supporters are starting to ask the question, why risk this again? The backlash isn't really about Rachel's talent. It's about trust. Fans feel burned. They were promised a modern fairy tale and got a movie that felt like a corporate lecture. They were told the new version would honor the original, only to see it rewritten with disdain. And now, the prospect of seeing that formula repeated, this time with one of Disney's most beloved modern stories, is sparking panic, not excitement. Internally, insiders claim Disney is aware of the tension. Some reports even suggest early-stage meetings have already included backup casting options, just in case the fire gets too hot. But other sources claim the studio is digging in, that they're betting the controversy will die down, that once trailers drop and the visuals land, people will forgive and forget. But that logic didn't save Snow White, and if Tangled follows the same trajectory, it might not just flop, it could permanently damage what's left of the studio's remake goodwill, because this time audiences won't be walking in blind. They've seen this movie before, and it ended in an empty theater with a bouquet of flowers and no one clapping. When Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White, the backlash was immediate. But it wasn't just about her, it was about what she represented. For many fans, it felt like Disney was rewriting not just a character, but a legacy, and expecting applause for it. Snow White, as written in the original Grimm tale and immortalized in Disney's 1937 animated classic, is described with one of the most defining phrases in fairy tale history, skin as white as snow. That line isn't just decorative, it's the origin of her name, the core of her image, the foundation of her identity. So when Disney cast a Latina actress in the role, it sparked a firestorm of cultural and creative debate. To some, it was bold. To others, it was betrayal.
You know what I can't wait to quit? Social media. I'm like so ready to just throw my phone away. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I know it's gonna happen at some point. And everyone's gonna get mad at me and they're gonna be like, no, because of me. Or they'll be thrilled and be like,
thank God Rachel's getting off social media.
And while casting alone wouldn't have doomed the project, insiders say it was the way the change was handled that turned friction into fury. Rachel didn't just defend her casting, she criticized the very film she was hired to represent. She dismissed the original story as weird, called the prince a stalker, and insisted that the new Snow White would be about self-empowerment and not dreaming about true love. Suddenly, what might have been a conversation about creative evolution turned into a perception of contempt. Disney wasn't honoring a classic, they were mocking it. And worse, they were doing it from the inside. The internet erupted. Fans who had grown up with the original felt insulted. Critics accused Disney of erasing timeless themes to chase Twitter clout. And Rachel, who should have been a celebrated newcomer stepping into a legacy role, became the lightning rod for everything audiences believed was going wrong. Family Guy and South Park didn't create that anger. They merely reflected it. They took the cultural tension already bubbling and shaped it into satire. But it was Disney's decisions, and Rachel's own words, that laid the groundwork. Insiders speculate that the backlash wasn't about diversity, it was about disrespect. There was no sense of reverence, no emotional bridge between past and present, just a cold corporate shrug and a press tour filled with sound bites that felt more like shade than celebration. And in that vacuum of care, audiences filled the gap, with memes, with edits, and eventually with open rejection. Because when a studio forgets why a story mattered in the first place, even the most expensive remake can collapse under its own ego. For a company known for micromanaging every frame of its films and every line in its press releases, Disney's recent silence around Snow White has been deafening. No public defense, no damage control, just vague statements, delayed rollouts, and a noticeable shift in tone. But according to insiders, that silence isn't accidental, it's strategic. And it's being driven by full-blown internal panic. When the backlash first began, after Rachel Zegler's infamous interview circulated, there were talks of correction. Insiders claim that early Disney meetings included brainstorms on how to reframe the conversation. More lighthearted promos, maybe a nostalgic callback trailer, possibly a charm offensive featuring Gal Gadot. But then South Park aired, and then Family Guy. And suddenly Disney wasn't just dealing with fan frustration, they were the punchline of every cultural commentator on the internet. At that point, the conversation shifted from how do we fix this to how do we make people stop talking about it? According to entertainment sources close to the studio, Disney executives began scrubbing any content that could reignite the fire. The cast commentary track for the Disney Plus release? Canceled. Behind-the-scenes featurettes featuring Gal and Rachel? Pulled. Social campaigns that once positioned Rachel front and center, toned down or deleted. Internally, some insiders reportedly pushed for a bold public pivot, maybe lean into the criticism, own the changes, and clarify the film's intentions. But others, especially those watching the viral momentum online, allegedly warned that any further statements would just feed the flame.
Just let the bloat be bloat. Let her bloat.
Nobody wants a movie about true love?
The strategy they settled on? Go quiet, go dark, wait for the internet to move on. But it hasn't, because the roasts keep coming. And every week, the memes resurface. Every time a clip of Rachel's interviews trends, every time a TikTok loops Peter Griffin screaming, "What is everything?" Disney is reminded that they don't control the narrative anymore. This is unfamiliar territory for the Mouse House. They're used to orchestrating cultural moments, not reacting to them. But Snow White didn't just lose money, it lost control. And now, even as executives allegedly race to protect future projects like Tangled, their silence around Snow White speaks volumes. They know the backlash isn't just about the film, it's about how they handled it, or more accurately, how they didn't. And unless something changes, insiders warn the studio may be facing a larger reckoning than just one failed remake. If there's one thing Disney used to rely on, it was tribal loyalty. Culture war lines were predictable. Conservatives might blast a film's politics, but progressives would show up in force. Activists would defend the intent. Celebrities would double down. And the studio? It would weather the storm with a knowing smile. But with Snow White, something shifted. For the first time in recent memory, both sides of the internet are laughing, and neither is laughing with them. On the right, the critiques were loud and immediate. The erasure of traditional romance, the DEI-driven rebrand, the rewriting of a beloved classic into a politically charged empowerment lecture. It was all seen as further proof that Disney had abandoned its audience in favor of ideological pandering. And then came Rachel's soundbites, feeding the fire, calling the prince a stalker, calling the original weird, joking about how no one is coming to save her. It didn't feel like evolution, it felt like hostility. But on the left, that's where the real surprise came. Instead of defending the film, liberal commentators and comedians began joining the roast. Late-night hosts aired clips of the empty theater walkthrough. Progressive podcasts dissected how Disney had lost the thread. Even influencers who once cheered reimaginings started asking uncomfortable questions. Why does this feel so hollow? Why does this look so forced? It wasn't just that people disagreed with the message, it was that they didn't buy the delivery. They saw the press tour fumbles, the awkward chemistry between the leads, the marketing pivots, the dead-eyed, red carpet interviews. And they started asking the same question Peter Griffin did. What is everything?
This clip is already 9 minutes long on my phone, and I bet you learned nothing.
Insiders say this bipartisan backlash has Disney rattled. "We can't spin this," one executive reportedly said. "We're getting clowned from both directions." And it's true. When South Park and Family Guy both tear into you, and when your own fans start saying, "I'm done," you've crossed a line that no brand, no matter how big, can afford to ignore. Rachel Zegler, meanwhile, is caught in the middle of it all. A young actress with genuine talent, now transformed into a cautionary tale. Not because she said the worst thing, not because she gave the worst performance, but because she became the face of a film and a franchise that tried to moralize before it tried to entertain. And in today's climate, that's a recipe for cultural exile. Because audiences don't want to be told what to believe. They want to feel something, to escape, to hope. And when that's replaced with self-righteous lectures and tone-deaf interviews, they don't get mad, they get sarcastic. And when sarcasm comes from both sides of the spectrum, it's not protest anymore, it's a punchline. In Hollywood, redemption arcs are always possible, until they're not. Some stars recover from flops, others survive scandals, but the hardest stain to wash off, becoming a punchline. And that's exactly where Rachel Zegler finds herself. Not as a fallen star, not as a villain, but as a meme. Preserved in cartoon satire, stitched into TikToks, and looped endlessly in YouTube compilations. Because once you've been roasted by Family Guy, obliterated by South Park, and quietly distanced by your own studio, how do you come back from that? Insiders say the road ahead for Rachel is steep. Every move she makes is scrutinized, every interview parsed. Her next casting choice, her next film, even her silence, is now loaded with subtext. Will she clap back, lay low, reinvent, or quietly disappear into the Hollywood churn, remembered not for her breakout in West Side Story, but for the awkward TikTok in a half-empty theater and the offhand comment about the prince being a stalker? There's still time. She's young, undeniably talented, and not without defenders. But to reclaim her narrative, she'd have to do something rare in the modern industry. Take accountability, show humility, and deliver a performance so compelling it drowns out the noise. And in an age when noise is everything, that's no small task. Disney, for its part, seems to be moving on. But even as they pivot toward Tangled and the next wave of remakes, the shadow of Snow White looms large. The backlash, the boycotts, the burned goodwill, it all lingers. And with The Simpsons reportedly circling for their own takedown, this may be the first time in history that 3 of the biggest animated shows in television all landed on the same cultural target and fired. So what do you think? Has Rachel Zegler been unfairly vilified? Or did she push too far in rewriting a classic? And can Disney ever win back audiences after turning fairy tales into fuel for satire? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you're following this wild cultural fallout as closely as we are, and don't forget to subscribe, because when you're ready to hear what Hollywood really doesn't want you to know, the next video is already waiting for you.